Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Jay Caslow coming to you from the Introversion Podcast. It is July 16th, which is a Thursday. It's about noon. It's a beautiful sunny day in Philly. It's kind of funny how I just got back from the dentist and it seems like I record a podcast episode anytime I get back from the dentist. So I probably mentioned before, but maybe I didn't really get all into it, but how I tend to get all deep and philosophical and have my existential crises on days where I go to the dentist. I don't know, it's just something about it where it gets me thinking about my frailty and my humanity and my inevitable demise. Oh, I don't want to get all dark and because I don't want you to get through the wrong impression about this episode. This is not going to be a dark downer episode. This is because I'm actually feeling pretty good right now. I'm in good spirits. Here's the thing though. I'm recording this right now, but this morning when I woke up, I was thinking very clearly about an essay I wanted to write and post it on Medium. And I think this is the thing. It's like I've been saying it for a long time. I don't like writing. I'm not a fan of writing. It's like when I get into the zone and I look at what I've written, which isn't much in recent months or years, but I'll spend half a day writing an essay. And for those of you who don't know, I have posted a couple essays on Medium. I encourage you to go check them out if you want to see what I've written previously. I think there's 2 essays that I posted. Just go to medium.com/ I think you need the @ symbol and then Jay Caslow, JAYKASLO. And you'll see the 2 essays that I've written. And it took me a while. I mean, I don't know. I don't remember exactly, but at least half a day to write up both of those essays. And I'm proud of what I wrote, but it's just it doesn't come to me naturally to write like that. It feels like more of a chore to sit down and just weed out all the distractions and really focus and start writing. And, as hard as this may be to sit down and record a solo podcast episode, as hard as it is for me to focus on doing this and, again, just to weed out all the distracting thoughts, there's a certain flow to this that I feel like with just hitting record and talking, where I get into this flow, I get into this rhythm. And most of you probably know I'm a designer, I'm an animator, I'm a video maker. So it's very easy for me to get into that zone, when I'm drawing, when I'm painting, when I'm designing, like almost immediately. It's basically like I just need to start and I get into the zone and I can just spend hours just designing something graphically or, making an art piece. And I love that. I love that feeling of just the process and getting into it. But when it comes to writing, it's really hard for me to get into that flow, just getting into that zone. It is possible, and I do get into that flow every once in a while here and there, but the process of going from 0 to that is just daunting for me a lot of the time. So all that being said, like I was saying this morning, I had all these thoughts very specifically about what I wanted to write about. And then I went to the dentist, I walked home, and it's a long walk, a couple miles or whatever. And as I sat down now to write what I wanted to write this morning, I open up a blank text document and I'm ready to start writing, and it's like a total blank. And so I thought, all right, you know what? I don't feel like writing this right now. And, there's 2 schools of thought, right? There's the school of thought where you could just start writing, just get over that hump, just start writing, and then it'll come back to you, and then the flow will begin, and then, you'll go with it and you'll write something good, right? But then there's the other part of me where it's like, nah, if you're really not feeling it, don't write. Don't force it, right? Because if I would have had the opportunity to sit down this morning and write when I felt that, come upon me, that probably would have been the golden window to actually write. But since I'm not feeling it right now, I thought, you know what, let me try to take some of those thoughts that I wanted to write out, and instead let me just hit record and turn this into a podcast episode. And depending on how I like how this turns out, what I'm about to say, maybe I can take this and refine it a bit and use that as the basis for the essay that I'll write and ultimately post on Medium. So that being said, let me get into what it is that I wanted to write about this morning and what I'm going to talk about now. And the title is Uniquely Qualified. And what I mean by that is I feel like my particular story, the story of my life, my upbringing, and the rare combination of circumstances that defined my story and ultimately helped shape or define my identity, it's rather unique. And I often say this, or whenever I bring this kind of thing up, I say, look, if there's somebody out there who has a similar set of characteristics and life circumstances, I would love to meet you. I would love to sit down and have a conversation with, just to know that there's somebody out there who has experienced a very similar thing that I've experienced. Because as of right now, I feel like, still to this day, I feel like my sister is one of the only people who has been through what I'm about to talk about. And even with her, it was different because obviously she's a female and I'm a male. And that also poses different variables in the equation. It's changes the dynamic. So her experience is going to be uniquely different than mine just because of that. Even though we were both traveling in the military growing up, moving around the same locations in the same family, she was 4 years older. She's a female. So her experience, her story is going to be vastly different than mine just based on those two factors alone. So, but that being said, like I'm saying, if there's other people out there who can relate very closely to what I'm talking about, I would love to meet you. I would love to talk with you. Would certainly love to at least interview you and have you on the podcast. So if you are out there listening, if you have a very similar upbringing as mine, I would love to know you. I would love to talk with you. So all that being said, let me get into it. Some of this I've said before, and some of you know these things about me. I may divulge some new bits of information here today that a lot of you who know me well don't even know. But basically I was born in 1977. And I'm the youngest. Like I mentioned, I have an older sister by 4 years. And I was born as a military brat, an Army brat. So my dad immigrated to the United States. It must have been probably late 60s. And apparently he came here with a suitcase and $7. So when I was born, my parents were very poor and we didn't really have much. And, that was sort of how I entered into this world. So I'm not really going to get so much into the financial reality of my upbringing. I will touch upon that. But really, I want to focus this conversation on race and culture. And the thing is from age 0 to pretty much till I got to college, at age 18, the only Indian people I ever met, I was related to. So that includes the couple times I met my grandparents, both on my father's side and mother's side, and also my uncles and cousins, basically. So that was pretty much it. In the military, growing up in the Army, all of my schoolmates, everybody who I got to know basically was either white, black, or some form of Latino, right? That's it. I had no Indian peers. I had no Indian community. So what I want to get at here is to convey the fact that I had no Indian racial, obviously I could look in the mirror and see that I'm Indian, and I know my parents are from India, and I get it. Okay, I'm Indian. But in terms of what that meant in my life,
absolutely nothing.
It was literally like just something it was just a checkbox, when it comes time for, the census or whatever forms you're filling out at school or whatever. It's like, okay. And back then I think everybody was just, it wasn't as sort of crystallized as it is today. All these distinctions that are made. Nowadays it's like not even as simple as male, female. It's like, oh, we're on the spectrum, and all things are a lot more granular today and complicated. But back then it was like, I think there was a checkbox maybe for like Asian, Pacific Islander, Samoan, and that was it. So it was like that, or black, or white, or Hispanic, Latino, or something like that. So I would always check the box Asian or Pacific Islander or Samoan, right? So, that was the box I was in. But really, let's face it, I had no Indian identity. I had no Indian community. I had none of that. So I was living in a white, black, Hispanic world. And kind of almost to make things worse, well, there's two things that, again, further distance me from an Indian racial identity. One of those was the fact that my parents subtly made it known to me. They didn't bang me over the head with this, but it became known to me that a large part of being Indian, it means to be Hindu. And, for those of you who are, researched on this at all, like you go to India, it's a largely Hindu country. It's a largely Hindu controlled country. So the little that I know about India, and truth be told, one of my Twitter handles that I maintain, that I own, is worst Indian ever. And I've kind of made a joke about that, but it's kind of true. Like I'm a terrible Indian in the sense of I'm not even aware of my own sort of ethnic, racial heritage. I barely knew my grandparents. I met them a couple times out of my life. I really don't know anything about the history of India, whatever oppression they experienced under the British, or all of that. Like I saw Gandhi at some point when I was a kid, and that was pretty much the extent of whatever I might know about India and their historical relations with Britain and all that. So obviously that is a sham of an education to even know the history of my own people. And it's been interesting for me lately because in researching and preparing for the upcoming podcast episode that you'll hear probably in the next week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, with my Nigerian friend Obi, he sent me a bunch of links to check out, and a lot of it was about Black history and slavery and the oppression by white people of blacks and all these things, and police brutality toward blacks. And it dawned on me as I was learning all of these things about African and Black American history, and I'm like, I'm Indian. And I'm sitting here spending hours and days of my life researching about Black people. And not that there's anything wrong with that at all, but it's like, shouldn't I at least start with knowing the history of my own race, of my own, familial background and heritage? I think, he's Black and he knows all about his Black history. Like, I'm Indian, I should know all about my Indian history, right? And I don't. But it's interesting because it's like, it's not even an issue in society today. I mean, who's talking about Brown Lives Matter? Who's talking about Indian issues and racism toward Indian people, and or the oppression of Indian people by British people in the past? I mean, nobody's talking about that nowadays. And I'm not saying that people should be talking about that nowadays. I certainly have lived my life, fine, so to speak, in America without even knowing about my Indian heritage and the oppression of my great grandparents and all that stuff. So, or what may or may not have been. So I don't mean to bring that up in terms of clamoring that, oh, we should all be learning more about the oppression of my people and brown Indian people. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that at all. The point is that I don't even know about my own racial background. But here I am learning so much more about the racial backgrounds and the racial histories of other races, specifically the Black African population. Which leads me to the point of me growing up in the military. And, I think I mentioned 2 points I wanted to make. One is that my parents did not encourage me to sort of be more Indian because they themselves were at odds with Indian culture. I mean, obviously they're way more Indian than I am because they came from India. My parents were both born in India and came here. So obviously it's way more a part of them than it is for me because I was born in America. And I've lived my life growing up in America and in Germany. And again, in both places, I was not around Indian people. I had no Indian community. And the only rare instances I had with Indian people at all was when we would occasionally visit cousins of mine and uncles and aunts. So, yeah. So the 2 points I wanted to make, I want to keep coming back to this. So the 2 points I wanted to make there is that my parents made it known to me that being Indian is, it's sort of interlinked. It's intrinsically intertwined with being Hindu. And we're a Christian family. We're not Hindu. So therefore, you kind of end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater. You know, the fact that the Hindu thing gets thrown out for us, that also means the Indian culture, the Indian identity, the Indian racial whatever, also gets thrown out. So basically, here I am, growing up in America and Germany, mostly America, in a military subcontext where it's all whites, blacks, and Hispanics. And I don't even have an Indian racial identity to stand on because my parents didn't give that to me or encourage me with that or educate me in that way. And I'm not putting a label on it as good or bad. I get it. My parents' values were Christian. My dad was a friggin' pastor in the army. So we're like super Christian. So why would they want to potentially poison my head with the thoughts of a different religion like Hinduism? You know, I could understand that, the way they raised me. They raised me to be very Christian, and they wanted me to probably be the next generation of Christian. And, you know, they didn't want to risk putting other religious ideas in my head. And I get that. You know, I understand, you know, the impetus for them to do that, for them to raise me in that way. I get that. So there's that. Now, the second thing that I want to talk about there is that I didn't have that racial identity or community to stand upon. And yet I was mocked and made fun of growing up, mostly in Maryland and in Virginia. I was mocked and made fun of by other kids for being Indian. And when I say that, I want to be very clear on this, that it wasn't just white kids being racist toward me, it was black kids. And it's hard to quantify this, but in my mind, I think I was actually made fun of by black kids, definitely equal to how much I was made fun of by white kids, if not more so. And yeah, I do remember there were black kids kind of ganging up on me and making fun of me, you know, the whole like dot on the head or making fun of my last name, which for those of you who don't know, this, I don't want to go into this whole sidebar, but I actually changed my name as an adult. So for those of you who don't know, my last name, I'm not even going to get all into that now, but my last name was, that I was born with, was 5 syllables and it ends in poo. So you do the math. You know, being the only Indian kid growing up in an all white, all black Hispanic community. And I was made fun of a lot. And I felt ostracized, and it felt like, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? You know? How am I going to retaliate against a group of black kids making fun of me? You know, I'm not going to get into a physical fight with them because they would probably kick my ass, you know? There's more of them than me, you know, and who's on my side? And it was a different time back then. We're talking the 80s, like the early 80s. It was a different time then than it is now. You know, now I could probably shout about it on Twitter or make it very known, and those people who are making fun of me would be ostracized. They would be canceled because they're the ones being racist toward me. And if I called that out, right, in theory, I would have the internet on my side. I would have Twitter mobs on my side. But none of that was the case back then. I was alone and I was isolated. Again, no Indian community. All I had was probably my parents on my side and my sister. Even though, like I said, she was 4 years older. So she wouldn't be there in the exact room context with me as I'm being mocked and made fun of for being Indian. So it's strange, right? Like, I'm being made fun of and attacked and verbally abused for being Indian by whites and blacks, and actually occasionally Hispanics as well, now that I think about it. So basically everybody who was around me, not everybody, but like those few assholes, let's face it, who were mocking me and making fun of me for being Indian, I had no recourse. It's not like I could get together with my Indian buddies and we turned it into like a West Side Story, you know.
You're never alone. You're never disconnected. You're home with your own. When company's expected, you're well protected.
You know, you join up with your gang and you go against the other gang. Like, no, there was none of that. There was none of that. I had no allies in that sense. And I had my friends who were a diverse group of friends here and there. But again, this also complicates things because we're talking about me growing up in the military, which means you don't fight this battle and establish your allies once and for all, like in one community, and you build upon. You don't. Whatever allies or best friends you have in that moment when you're 7 years old, that's good until you're 8 or you're 9. And then guess what? Oh, we're being relocated. We have to move to New Jersey now. We have to move to somewhere else in Virginia now. Oh, we're going to move to Germany now. So we would live there for 2 or 3 years, and then the same cycle happened. I deal with people making fun of my last name. I deal with people, again, I'm the only Indian guy, no matter where we go. I'm the only Indian kid. I get made fun of and picked on all over again. And fine, I find that my couple friends here and there to, just to bond with, but, that lasts for another couple years. And then guess what? Oh, we got to up and move again. This was my childhood. Every 3 years or so, we end up moving, and I have to start the struggle all over again. The teacher introduces me in a new classroom or whatever, and they butcher my last name, and everybody giggles, everybody laughs, and here we go all over again. It's kind of this repeated trauma over and over again. And sometimes, frankly, I'm surprised I've ended up as peaceful and loving and kind-hearted and logical and, non-racist as a person as I am today. I really wonder that, because when I actually dig deep in here and reflect on my childhood, it does make me a kind of angry at the injustice of it all and how much it sucked for me. But you know what? Growing up in the military and growing up the way I did, for better or worse, it's like I got used to the pattern of just having to swallow bitter pills, because that's what life is. You don't get to have things your way. If people pick on you and make fun of you, guess what? That sucks. But you know what? That's life. So it was ingrained into me from a young age. I don't think anybody's like preaching this message, what I'm telling you right now. Nobody was preaching that into my head, but this was, I think, what I was internalizing. You deal with shit as a kid, and you have some guidance from your parents, you have some help and allies here and there, but really you're just trying to figure this out. Like, what is my identity, or where do I fit in, or what is my place in the world, or what is right, what is wrong, like how should I operate, And I got messages from the church. I got messages of peace and forgiveness and love from Christianity and Jesus. Turn the other cheek, carry your cross, all these kind of messages, right? Which is kind of disgusting to me in a way when I think back on it now, because I am obviously not a Christian anymore, but it does kind of piss me off that it perpetuates the abuse, If a woman is in an abusive relationship or in an abusive marriage, I would not tell her, well, turn the other cheek and, forgive your husband for beating you and all of that. No, fuck that. I'm all for, people should not have to be subjected to abuse, and people should not defend aggressors. And I don't care whether the aggressor is a man or a woman or black or Hispanic or white or Asian or whatever. Like, if people are assholes to other people, I'm just not cool with that. I'm not down with that. And whether that was how my parents raised me or whatever, I don't know, or maybe that's just my own personal concoction of what I glean from every source, whether it was church and religion and teachers and society and whatever. But I don't know. I operate now, and I have operated for a while on principles. My religious beliefs have changed, of course, in the last 10 years. I'm no longer a Christian, but when I sit there and I think about my principles, I think a lot of my Christian friends probably feared that I would just go off the deep end, and I heard the term slippery slope so many times. And I don't know what they thought. Like, they thought, oh, I'm just going to go off and have sex with every girl now and get AIDS and just be a complete recluse and start murdering people and just become a chaotic, evil, serial killing sinner. I don't know. It's ridiculous. But whatever it is, this slippery slope, however bad they thought I would get, the reality is the way I interact with people, it's really not much different at all now in my 40s as a non-Christian. It's not really any different now than it was when I was a Christian back in my 20s and teens. I try to operate under principles of treat people with respect, listen to people. And I don't have to agree with everybody. And that's the thing that burns me up about this whole free speech debate and hate speech. Like, dude, I've dealt with so much hate speech as a kid, and nothing was done about it, right? And now I hear people making up bullshit like, if you say that all lives matter, if you say a statement that all lives matter, people are ready to literally put a bullet in your head, which just happened to this white woman in Indiana. And all I did was brought it to the attention on my Facebook. I was like, well, this sucks. Doesn't her life matter? The fact that she was white and she was gunned down because of something she said? Regardless of what somebody says, when is it ever right to put a bullet in somebody's head? For whatever reason. Especially because of words that were said. There's this whole thing now, like people trying to equate words with violence, like words are violence. No. Words are words. Violence is violence. At best, you could make the argument that words may lead to violence. But at the end of the day, it's those who commit violent acts. The blood is on their hands. Because you could take words I'm saying right now, or you could take anybody's words. You could take playing a video game. You could take reading a book. You can take looking at a piece of art and say, oh, well, that inspired me to go murder somebody. I call bullshit on that. That is your decision if you're going to go put a bullet in somebody else's head. That's your decision if you're going to make racist comments, like blatantly racist comments. If you're going to use the N-word and throw that around at people, that's on you. To take actions that physically harm somebody else, or I don't want to say like verbally harm other people, because even that, it's like, look, I was verbally abused by blacks, whites, Hispanics growing up all the time as a kid. Is that right? Is that cool? Of course not. And we should be moving toward a society where you don't insult people and throw racial epithets at people. You don't insult and judge people because of their race or their ethnicity or their sexual preference or whatever. Like, we should be moving toward a society where we respect people no matter how different they are than us. Whether it's their racial makeup or whatever, or even ideologically, right? There's people mostly on the left these days that I find a lot of their views appalling. Whether it's their hatred of America, and I can understand really hating aspects of our history that is an atrocious racist history. I get that. But why can we not look around right now in the year 2020? Why can we not look around and see diversity? I've seen it all the time in New York City, living there for 15 plus years. And I loved it. That's what I loved about New York City. You get on any subway train, black people, white people, Asian people, Indian people, old people, young people, just everybody all together on the same subway train. And what you get is street artists and performers, and just every day is an exciting adventure, I used to feel like, because you walk out from your apartment, you go out on the streets, you get on the subway, you don't know what you're going to see or who you're going to meet. But to me, that's what made New York City so great, and that's what made diversity so great. is it's racial and all of that sort of diversity, but also like people had different ideas, you know? And I think to me, that's what gives a richness to life is a diversity of ideology. I don't want to live in an echo chamber, you know? And the fact that a lot of the tough conversations to be had these days right now are only able to be had over Facebook, and it leads to increased arguments, and because it's not a proper means of two people or multiple people connecting. When you're shouting at each other back and forth behind a keyboard on Twitter or in Facebook comments or YouTube comments. The best way for two people to connect, whether you agree with each other or vehemently disagree with each other, is face to face, or second best on a phone call or video call. But that is the best way. And that we've been deprived of that because of this stupid fucking pandemic. And yeah, it pisses me off that this thing is just getting extended forever. You know, this disease that's killing 0.0, like less than 1% of the population. And it's a very specific group of people who are at high risk for this thing. But anyway, I'm not going to get sidetracked here and talking about COVID, but I want to get back to the point of this whole racism thing and how I feel uniquely qualified. And what I mean when I say that is that the fact that I have no racial identity, I acknowledge the fact that I am Indian, but I don't necessarily take pride in that. You know, how could I possibly be an Indian supremacist and think my race is the superior race or better than any other race? You know, when I hear white supremacists talk like that, which is a very small percentage. I mean, it's, I wish you could just somehow measure that, because you can't really trust how honest people are going to be in a poll or whatever. But really, let's face it, the David Dukes of the world, the people who are so overtly racist, they will come out and say out loud, you know, white people are superior and we are genetically better than Asians and blacks and everybody else. I'm like, okay, those asshole idiots, fine, whatever. I don't even take those people seriously. That's how idiotic their ideas are. But, you know, removing those wackos from the equation, it's very easy to identify them. But the problem with the debate now is that people are seeing racism everywhere. Even when it's not there, they're still seeing racism. And I've seen some new bullshit that's like the principles of hard work and individuality and personal responsibility. I mean, this is shit that now I just saw. They're saying these are white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant ideas. And I mean, like, what kind of bullshit is this that we're heading into? So if you work hard and do well for yourself, that's somehow a white principle or a white construction or whatever bullshit they're talking about. This is fucking bullshit. And this nonsense is getting spouted out there, you know, and I'm like, I don't know. This shit is getting so ridiculous. It's laughable almost. It's like an onion. It's like an Onion article mocking itself, whatever. But anyway, I'm not going to ramble on forever about this. And even as I'm saying all of this, I don't really know exactly how I'll concisely convert this into a Medium essay. So maybe I won't even end up writing or posting that Medium essay. But if I do write it, I think the thing that I wanted to focus on in it and bring this back to now in this podcast recording is whatever. I know I've said some things and stated some opinions out here about things out there, and fine, those things are under scrutiny. But if I do post a Medium essay, I want it to be 100% fully about my personal experience and everything I was talking about growing up in the military with my particular set of circumstances and racial ostracization that I experienced. I want to focus on that. I know I've drifted a little bit off here and there for this episode, but, you know, I want the focus here to be on me telling my story. Because when a person tells their own unique personal story of everything that they have experienced in their life, there's no refuting that. There's no counter argument to that. There's no argument or debate about it. one human being's experience is their experience. And I'm willing to listen to every person out there, whoever I like, tell me about your experience. I will sit here and listen to what your experience has been. Have you been pulled over by the cops every day of your life and you're racially profiled? I will sit here and listen to your experience. And I'm not going to tell you that your life experience is wrong or inaccurate or diluted or you need to be educated because you're wrong about your own life experience. Like, no, fuck that. Every human being experiences shit. And life is not easy for anybody. I mean, it's just for some people, fine. A silver spoon in your mouth, you're born and you're white and privileged and tall and blonde and beautiful, fine. Maybe everything will come to you at your fingertips. But you know what? Even those people commit suicide. Even those people have struggles of their own. So life is not easy. Life is not fair. I don't care what your race is, but life is tough for everybody, and everybody has to figure shit out for themselves. And I'm here in this small way, in this moment, telling a little bit about my story of my childhood growing up and the racial ostracization that I experienced and the lack of racial identity that I've had and to some degree continue to have. I don't define myself as being Indian. You know, I am Indian, fine, but it's not really what defines me. Anybody who knows me well knows, like, I don't go around, like, I'm not like an Indian person. Like, there's not, you know, people who know me. It's like, yeah, dude, I don't even think about you as being Indian. You know, you're just Jay, you know, you're just this guy, you know. So I kind of like that that's how I come across, and that's the person, you know, that I present myself as. And it, fast forwarding a little bit, I know I mentioned the name change earlier, but you all know my last name now is Kaslow, which is actually a combination of both my parents' names. So I found that to be really poetic, you know, taking letters from both of their last names and combining them and coming up with a short form Kaslow that I love. I love my name, and I take pride in that. I love my name, Jay Kaslow. But this is what I created for myself, you know? This isn't something I was just born with, like, oh, you're born black or you're born Indian or you're born white. I'm like, all right, fuck, that's the card. Those are the cards I was dealt. Fine, you know? And I understand certain people have certain advantages, you know? Tall people, handsome, beautiful, lovely, sexy, you know, people, they get paid more, you know? They get their pick of the litter in terms of, you know, choosing a mate. There's all kinds of advantages and disadvantages. You know, some people are born midgets. Some people are born with with both arms. Some people are born without a left arm or a right leg, or, you know, there's all varying levels of advantage and disadvantage that we're born into in this world. And like I said before, life is not fair. Life is not just. But can we at least agree that we should be striving toward a society where it's not about who's a victim? Obviously, there are real victims out there of rape and racism. And I could sit here and call myself a victim of racism throughout my whole life growing up. But you know what? I choose not to put that out there as my primary identity. It is a aspect of my identity that I'm sharing about today that a lot of people didn't know that about me. And my point is, they don't need to know those things about my history or my past in order to connect with me and know me as a person now in the year 2020. I would much rather people look at my body of work, you know, look at my art, look at my designs, look at my success that I've worked hard to achieve. Judge me according to that, you know, because those are the things that I feel like really constitute who Jay Kaslow is and what Introversion is as a brand and what I'm doing with my life. Don't define me by my race. I don't even define me by my race. And I find this whole conversation, so to speak, happening on the national level of this obsession with race. Again, I'm not saying there's no such thing as racism, and I'm not saying there is systemic this and that. Fine. Let's talk about specific problems, and let's talk about specific solutions to those problems. I am all for that. But I don't hear a lot of that in a lot of this rhetoric being thrown around today. You know, I hear a lot of hate. I I hear a lot of fear. I hear a lot of clamoring for vengeance and revenge. I mean, I've shared just a little bit without any details really of my childhood and all the verbal abuse and racist bullshit I had to put up with from blacks and whites and everybody. But I'm not out for vengeance. I'm not out for justice. I'm like, what's done is done. And as a childhood, I dealt with that. Luckily, I can go out today and people don't get in my face and make fun of and say why I don't have a dot on my head and make fun of my last name and all this and my whatever. I don't have to deal with that anymore because I'm glad we've at least evolved as a society. But then again, I don't know. If you're a little kid in school right now, I don't know if those struggles would still be the same. You know, I would like to think that if you're an Indian kid out there now, there are enough Indian people in America where people would at least kind of get it. There is a such thing as Indian people, and we don't all have dots on our heads and work at the Quickie Mart, you know? So I would like to think we've made progress, but again, I don't know. I don't have kids. I don't know what it's like out there for kids, but I do know I can speak again for my own experience, my own life as an adult now. I don't encounter that kind of racism anymore. And if I did, you know, if I went to some bar here and some dude was like, yo, Packy, or yo, you Indian brown fucker, I wouldn't laugh, but I would look at the person like, God, what a fucking imbecile. You know, what a moron. It's so beneath me to say something so stupid. Why would I even get into it with them? It's just so stupid. But that's how I view racism. And I guess I'm talking specifically about overt racism, of how stupid and idiotic it is. You know, when I hear David Duke talk and KKK people now, it's such a tiny percentage of the population. It's so tiny. But when I do hear them speak, I don't need to silence them. I don't need to cancel them. I don't need to get them off Twitter. I don't care if they tweet their bullshit, whatever. I don't care. Because it doesn't have any power over me. It's almost like the more they say, the more idiotic they come across. So they're doing themselves a disservice the more they actually speak up. That's how I see things. So obviously I'm not cool with this whole cancel culture, and I'm not cool with all of this other bullshit. And I feel like this kind of whole leftist, Marxist, whatever you want to call it, this whole cancel culture, social justice warrior cult-like thing, whatever you want to call it, I feel like the danger is they're going out and calling regular people racist. They're going out and calling concepts like hard work and discipline, they're calling that a white construct. They're calling that a remnant of whiteness. And I'm like, fuck that. That's fucking bullshit. So there's a lot more I could say, but I've said a lot already here today, and I'm just going to wrap it up with, I would love for society to start moving toward a mentality of, yes, there's quote unquote different races, and yes, there's racism and all that stuff, but most everybody who I've known in my life, who I've chosen to keep in my life, are not racist people, and I don't care if you're white. It does annoy me when this rhetoric goes around that all white people are racist. You know, because then I'm like, what the fuck? So basically, okay, I've been hanging out with white supremacists my whole life. Wow, okay. I guess that makes me a really poor judge of character then, if I've been hanging out with such white assholes my whole life. Yeah, that makes sense. Right. Yeah, no. Or maybe that's bullshit. And maybe I've been hanging out and been friends with people in my life who are actually decent people, who are fun and smart, you know, and great to be around, you know. And obviously anybody who knows me knows I've got quite a diverse range of friends, from, you know, Jamaican to Nigerian to African American to Korean to half Korean and white to Egyptian to Jewish to, you know, I got such a diverse, you know, it's funny. Probably the fewest of one particular racial group where I have the fewest friends. Isn't that funny? It would probably be Indian people. Indian people are I probably have the fewest number of Indian friends if you were to do a big pie graph sort of all of my the racial makeups of all my friends. The smallest chunk would probably be Indian. How about that? Which goes back to my original point of like, I don't define myself racially, and I don't really have an Indian racial identity. I don't. It's not how I think. I would love to be friends with more Indians, you know? If I meet cool Indians who I get along with, fine, I'll be friends with them. But if I don't, you know, but that's how I operate. That's how I wish more people would operate is, you know, like Martin Luther King Jr. said, you know.
I have a dream. My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream.
Judge people based on the content of their character, not the color of their skin. And that goes the same for white people. Don't necessarily look at white people and think they're all racist assholes. Don't do that. You know, deal with the people you deal with. You know, whether they're strangers or friends you know, like, are they decent people? Do they treat you well? Do they respect you? Do they love you? You know? Don't throw all that out the window and just say, oh, they're racist. They're a white person. Fuck them. Because you know what? That's racist. You know, and you're going to hear in my upcoming episode with Obi, we started out by talking about racism and the definition of racism. And we fundamentally disagree on that because he thought only white people can be racist because white people have all the power in this country. You know, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but you'll hear that conversation when it comes up. But my view on that is anybody can be racist toward anybody. It can go in any different direction. And when I say uniquely qualified, I mean, I'm not a racist person. You know, do I have racial views, this to that, stereotypes? Do I crack racial jokes? Yeah, sure, whatever. Like everybody, you know. But if you're going to define racism or being racist, this idea that you need to limit your thoughts and beliefs and jokes and everything to only being able to talk about your own kind, like, oh, I'm an Indian person, so I can only crack jokes amongst Indian people about Indian people, and that's the only thing that's acceptable in society? I think that's a boring bullshit society, to be honest. When I listen to black comedians crack jokes about white people, I laugh. And you know what? Most of the people in the audience, they all laugh too. And when white comedians, when Bill Burr says something about race or, you know, feminism or this and that, I laugh. And other people in the audience laugh. And he's a huge success as a comedian, you know. So people need to lighten the fuck up in a way and get over this whole racist obsession, because I find it really hindering to progress. And people need to get over all this rhetoric and hate and putting bullets in the back of people's heads because somebody said all lives matter. That's fucking bullshit. It's disgusting and deplorable. And the fact that people say that that woman in Indiana had it coming to her as if she deserved that to be killed, that's fucked up, man. You may as well blame a woman for being raped because the way she dressed, you know, or the way she looked or was friendly to a stranger, and that stranger took advantage of that. That's victim blaming. That's fucked up. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. There will probably be more on this subject later, of course. And unless I post another episode between now and next Tuesday, where I will post probably Christian, my interview with him, then this will be the last you hear from me until then. You know, I hope this episode maybe shed some light a little bit on my personal story. Maybe for those of you, some of you who know me well, maybe you got to know a little bit more about my upbringing that you didn't know before. Maybe some of you didn't know that I changed my name, but now you know. So yeah, a bunch of little interesting tidbits in there about my life and reflections upon my life. And sometimes it's good for me to reflect and think about these things because, you know, they're distant, foggy memories now. And I don't sit here and think about whatever racial abuse I was dealt as a kid, and all. I just don't think about it because it's not fruitful, right? And I think more and more people just need to learn to live in the moment. And, you know, if you need to see therapy and whatever in order to deal with the trauma in your past, then do that, you know. But eventually the goal should be to be healthy and whole today. and move forward with your life in a productive, constructive, joyous, beautiful way. I mean, come on. You're only around for a few years on this planet. Enjoy your time here. And if you're racked with baggage and hatred and feelings of vengeance and all that, don't let it plague you for longer than it has to. Deal with the issues of your past and move on. Get on with your life, and realize there's a lot of good people out there and there's a lot of assholes out there, but focus on distinguishing between the two, and hopefully you're not one of those assholes.
And I'm going to tell you something, T. Are you listening?
Yeah, I'm listening.
I'm not going to be one of those assholes, all right? It just makes me sick. It's like...
one of those racist pricks, one of those David Dukes. But if you are, okay, then you go do your David Duke thing and whatever. But for the rest of you who are decent people out there listening, I mean, if you've listened this far, you probably care about the kind of things I'm talking about, and you probably care about me on some level. So thank you for being there listening here. But to those of you, I say, move forward with your life. If you're a white person, please, fine. Be aware of what advantages you have in life because you're white. That's fine. Sure. Great. And realize that, a black person growing up in the inner city, they have the odds stacked against them. Fine. Okay. Let's identify that. And then let's figure out how can we better remedy that situation. Again, like I was saying earlier, let's talk about real problems and real solutions. Let's not do this whole self-flagellating, oh, woe is me, I'm white, I'm a terrible human being, I am Hitler because I'm white, and all this bullshit. Please, nonsense. Let's get over that, and let's move forward, please. Can we start to get over this? Can we start to deal with one another with love and respect, figure out the problems that ail our society, and let's come up with solutions, right? Let's get over the rhetoric. Let's move forward with our lives, no matter what your race is. We got to keep things going. We got to move forward. And I would rather move forward in a positive, constructive way rather than looting and murdering and destroying whatever we feel is in our way or bothers us or opposes us, conceptually, ideologically, whatever. Nah, I'm not cool with that. Today's episode is brought to you by
the State Lottery, where everybody wins. Actual odds of winning 1 in 380 million.
I hope this has been enlightening for you.
The Introversion Podcast is on its way, but we've obviously got a long way to go to get to where we want to be getting to. I will certainly be doing my part in cranking out new episodes every week, but here's where you come in. If you haven't yet done so, hit that subscribe button on whatever platform you're currently listening on. That way you can obviously get notified as soon as new episodes arrive. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please give a 5-star rating. It just takes a second, and it will empower the Introversion Podcast to rise up and conquer the suppression of algorithms that would otherwise crush this fledgling podcast into unknown oblivion. So yeah, please leave a rating, and even better, an actual review. Just a few words expressing what you dig about the podcast honestly would mean the world to me and would really help provide the motivation to keep this baby growing. Also, I'd love to hear from you at any time. Comments, questions, or if you're interested in being a guest on the podcast, send an email to podcast@introversion.com. You can also connect with me on social media. I am Jay Kaslow. That's JAYKASLO. On Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, pretty much wherever. I really want the Introversion Podcast to be something special. Raw, informative, entertaining, experimental.
Inconceivable.
Enlightening, therapeutic for you and me. Let's keep the conversations going about a range of topics that affect us all. Let's rise above all the hate and sickness and sadness and strife that plague this world. Let's seek to better understand each other and ultimately live our best lives. Seriously, let's do this thing.
Thank you. Goodbye now. Goodbye. Goodbye. Thank you. Goodbye.